G'day guys, today we're going to be looking at file management in Final Cut Pro, predominantly about how you organise your files once you've finished a project, how you can clean out the unused clips. That is the basis for the video, but we're also going to look at the ways that you might import clips and different ways that you can file your clips after the project completion, whether you do it by moving a whole library to an SSD or hard drive, or you just move the stock footage, keep the libraries on your main hard drive on your laptop or computer and point to the SSDs. This video is not about deleting render files. There's heaps of videos on that. You still should delete your render files, but this is going to cover things outside of that. And lastly, we'll discuss how you can save storage space when filming or outside of Final Cut Pro. This might sound a little bit convoluted as we go through, but it's really not. Once you start to do it, it's quite simple. And this video assumes a basic understanding of Final Cut Pro and what libraries and events are. So we're not really going to go into what each one is. Firstly, we'll just look at a library with all the media stored inside against a library that just has pointer files to media stored elsewhere on a computer or SSD. I won't spend too much time on this. Jump into Final Cut Pro. You can Command I to import. You can import straight off a memory card, but the only option you have is to copy to library. The method that most people will probably use is to open an SD card. Using their own file system, they will drop the footage where they want it to be. So for this example, we'll just use the video that we're making now. So we would copy them into that file. In Final Cut Pro, we would find that file and then we would import. Now this way we can copy to library or we can leave files in place. Most people will choose to leave files in place. So what this does, this is the library that we're working on. You can see that it's only 226 megabyte. So it keeps this library small and it just creates pointer files where the original media should be is just pointer files. So the library stays small. You could store all of your actual footage, this folder here, on an external SSD, edit off the SSD, and keep the libraries on your main hard drive. The disadvantage to this is that you can't edit without the SSD or hard drive that your footage is on. The other option is having a library with all of the content included. So this library, for example, has all the media in it, hence the bigger size. There's two different ways that you can create your library. Now it's also two different ways that you can store footage. So if we look at these two SSDs here, you see SSD 1 over here is consolidated libraries with all the media inside. You can see the size of all these libraries. You can still use a file system of your own creation, but you're organizing with libraries. All of your media is inside here. So there's a few different ways that you can approach this method. For example, if we look in here, each event is listed as an episode of a YouTube series. So you can be creative with how you name your events to find stuff, and all of your footage will be inside. If you ever wanted to find the footage again, you could do so using the clip's file name. So you know where your GoPro footage is or your A1 footage. Another way to do it is to have all your events as different cameras. You'll be able to find anything from any camera, from a location, and then from a camera. It's the same thing, but the library name and the event names have been done differently. It's up to you how you name your library and events inside that, and then how you do your filing system here. The other way to do it is shown here in SSD2, so when you're offloading footage, you can just save the footage itself, and then within your file system, you'll be able to go back and find anything that you might need later down the track. So some people prefer this method because it gives you greater customization, how it's all named. So some people find this easier to find in the future, but you can store libraries within a folder hierarchy with all the media inside. You just need to be creative in how you name the library and the events inside, because the library will be your second last opportunity to name something, with the event being your last opportunity to name something. So this library and this library, which we're in over here, these are the two different ways of editing in Final Cut. One with the media inside the library, the other with pointer files. When you've finished and you've gone through the deletion process of unused clips, these are two different ways to store your media. You can store them as clips only and have all your libraries still on your hard drive, which saves a lot of space on your hard drive. You just need to remember to connect your SSD when you want to edit, or you can move everything around within a library, and then no matter where you are, as long as you have that library, that footage will be packaged within the library. Most people prefer to import the files through an SD card into Mac OS and use a file naming scheme that they've created. When you do it this way, you just have Final Cut leave the files in place and it will just create a pointer to the original media, which is in a folder scheme of your choosing. People prefer this because they like the comfort of naming things themselves and they find it easier to find down the track when it's on an old hard drive or something like that, if they ever need to. The other way of doing it is to have it copied directly into a library, and Final Cut will control the media naming. If you do your keywords correctly, you can find any footage like you would in Lightroom, for example, with Final Cut Pro operating as a bit of a search engine. So if you think this filing system over here isn't specific enough and you might have trouble finding footage, what you can do within Final Cut Pro is create a new smart collection, which is Option Command N here, and we'll just call this master. Now you set a bunch of parameters in here to find footage that you want to find. So using this as an example, this will filter out all of your footage. You can go all or any here. This is just logic. Say for example, I wanted to find a GoPro shot that is shot at 60 frames per second. That will filter out all my shots at 60 frames per second to use as slow motion. That's just one example. Another way you could do this is, say, if I normally shot with the A7R3 30 frames per second and I wanted to find a video frame that was not 30 frames per second, I could have these two and then that would show me everything. I shoot at 24, so it's showing me everything anyway. That's an example of how I can use that when you're going through your old hard drives. If you want to find a very specific shot, if you've done keywording really well, this will help. Otherwise, you can use video frame rates, you can use resolutions, you can use dates. So that gives you a lot of control in able to find old footage. But keep in mind, that's not limited just to this file system where the media is stored in the library. You can do that in your libraries that have pointer files. You can do the same thing with your master data search, but you need to make sure that that media is connected. So these are just examples of how you might offload your footage at the end after you've tidied up a project and deleted the unused clips. So now we'll go through how you actually tidy up the project and delete the unused clips. So there is one way that you can actually delete unused portions of clips without any plugins or anything. It's pretty tedious, but I'll show you how to do that now. If you have footage like this, where there's a long intro, but you didn't use the start of the clip, you can get rid of that using what you have available in Mac OS. Command-Shift-R, spacebar for preview. Now in the top right corner here, this will allow you to get rid of handles. But you'll have to watch it to make sure you don't delete too far. If you're happy with doing that, I personally don't because it takes too long. You can say done. You can replace the original, which will delete that handle, or you can make it a new clip. If, for example, you wanted to get really into it and delete the portions in between the orange, you would have to find it in the browser, and going through this method, you would actually have to export the pieces of the clip that you did want as a new clip. Do that over and over again for all the portions that you did use, and then at the end you would have to delete the original file and then you would have to relink these to the new file names. So it's way too much hassle. The only time I would ever use that is if I had a really long section of unused clip and then a minute worth of used footage. You could delete the previous 3 or 4 minutes if you really wanted to. Personally, I don't even bother with that. So there's 2 ways here to accomplish the exact same thing. One is using the browser to find clips in the Finder and then deleting them and emptying the bin. The other is by copying a project into a new library and then consolidating the project in that library, which only consolidates the used media, because when you copy that project, it only copies the media that was used for that project. If you copy a whole event, it's a different story. All the media in that event will get copied. Alright, so we're using this as an example now. We're going to go through file management and deleting unused files at the end of a project. Let's pretend this project is complete. Now you might be tempted to filter by unused clips and then right click, reveal in Finder is Shift-Command-R, but you can't actually use this filter. If you see these little orange lines and what looks like little orange dots, these are the portions of these clips that have been used in the timeline. If you filter by unused, you will see this portion of the clip. So clip 601, Shift-Command-R, shows you the clip in the Finder. You delete this from your computer and then you've lost clip 601, All these bits that were in the timeline are now gone, and Final Cut has no reference to them. So you can't use the filter unused to find clips that haven't been used at all. What you can do is find clips that have no orange lines at all. Click on them, Shift Command R, delete, empty the trash, and they're gone. But it's a very tedious way of doing it. There's a much quicker way. Okay, so the fastest way to delete clips that are completely unused, what you want to do is have a library that is dedicated to finished projects. You can see here I have two libraries. One is content creation working, the other is content creation. Now the reason I have this is because this is dedicated to completed projects. When you drag one project from one library to another, only the used media will be dragged along with it. Only these with orange will be dragged along in full. So to do this, you have to forget the fact that you are someone who has small libraries pointing to footage on an SSD or a hard drive or somewhere else on the computer. What we're going to do temporarily is consolidate all the media in a new library. On the new library that's dedicated to completed projects, you want your storage locations in the inspector window, which is Command 4 to find it. You want your media to be in library. So Final Cut Pro Storage Management, this is our event, this is our finished project. In the library that's going to be all the finished projects, create a new event. Now we don't create a new project because we're going to be dragging the project from the other library into this one. Now, finished project, drag it across to this new event that we've just created, and we're going to take the original media. Okay, so just quickly, that is not quite finished. If we go into this library that's for completed projects, here's this new event that we created. You'll notice it's 12.2 megabytes. The reason for that is because even though we have selected that we want our media stored in the library, we have to consolidate the media first. So with the project selected in the new library, go to File, Consolidate Project Media, Original Media. Now, we go back out here. This same event is 19.42 gig. So that successfully brought all of that media over to here. But you'll notice it's smaller than the other file that we manually put things in. And the reason for that is because there's a lot of unused footage in here. So for people that prefer to store things as a library, that is basically all you have to do. You drag this now onto your SSD, and that's that storage process complete. Now, if you prefer the method where you have a library on your laptop or computer and it just points to the original media, what you need to do to cull this media and save 4 gig in this instance, but I've had it save up to 80 to 100 gig in some larger projects. We go into here, find our footage. Now it's broken up into different camera names. In the library where we've consolidated the footage, go to your original media. You can see that only 3 clips were used. So one of these was unused. We select all, delete them, take the ones that were used and drag them into the folder that they belong in. Now if you hold Option here, it will copy. If you don't hold Option, it will move them. So there's 2 different options there. You can copy them across or you can move them. At the moment, I'm going to copy them. Now you can see there's no A7R3 footage here, so you could go through and delete all of these. And the last thing will be the screen recordings. So you can go through and delete all of these screen recordings. And then in this screen recordings folder, you can drag these across. Again, you can move them or you can press Option to copy. As it stands now, you have a copy of the media in this library that is made for completed projects, and you have all the original media. So to get this library down back to a smaller size, so it only has pointer files, you can move the folders rather than copy. If you copied them across before, what you can do is delete everything in there. So now you have within your own file system, however you want to lay it out, you have only the used media. All you've done is drag from here, which was the original media. Now if we go back into our project, you will notice that this library for the completed projects has automatically generated these linking files again that link to the original media that you've just dragged out. Now you only have one copy of the original media. You don't have a copy here and here. So now you are back to your preferred method of only storing footage in your nominated file system. If Final Cut failed to create these links again, you can go to the clips that are missing, go up to File and Relink Files to Original Media. Now I don't have any that didn't work, so I have nothing in here. But if you did, you would just have to click on this parent folder and it would find them amongst all these folders, or you can specifically find the folder and click on the folder. Delete that media. Now you'll see in Final Cut that it's all gone red, missing files. Command A, File, Relink Files with Original Media, locate all. Go into the new folder where we've created everything, this which is now 114 gig, and choose. All 86 files have been matched. We relink the files and everything works again. Now, back in that library, we've gone from 114 gig to 12 kilobytes because now it is just pointing to those folders, and this is your 114 gigabytes. So you no longer have two copies. Alright, so there you can see the two different methods and where the media is stored. There's pros and cons to both methods. You can have a file system of your own design and incorporate the libraries into that. You just got to remember that the libraries and the events are the last two steps of that hierarchy, so you want to name them in Final Cut Pro. Once you jump inside the library in Finder, you don't mess around with stuff. So when you have your media consolidated in a library, you can move that library wherever you want, and you always have that media with it, with all the projects inside the library and all the events. The other way of doing it to save storage space is you can maintain all your libraries on your laptop or computer hard drive and point to external hard drives or SSDs that store all the larger files and the actual stock footage. This way you free up a lot of space on your computer. Just to get an idea of how much space you can save, I've got one library open here. This project here, timing belt and water pump. In my manual naming scheme, where I manually drag all the footage over, timing belt and water pump counts for 198.47 gigabytes. Now, after you go through this deletion process, the final product will be 122, gone from 198 to 122. So you want to go through this process before you dump everything onto a hard drive, because it all adds up and then you can fit more finished projects onto a hard drive. More often than not, you don't need to save a master file, a lossless version, Apple ProRes for example. So here's an export of that project as Apple ProRes, 106.4 gig. Here's that same export at 10.14 gig. Now this is HEVC or H265. What I'd recommend for most people is not to do a Apple ProRes file for work that is only presented to YouTube. Because we have all our original media here on hard drives, which currently is still on the storage with the computer, but will be moved to hard drives eventually, it can be found again and brought back in for another edit. If you're only uploading to YouTube, you don't need a ProRes version of your project. The second thing I would consider is just deleting your footage completely. For these YouTube videos that get uploaded, you really need to ask yourself, do you actually need the footage? Will you ever need the footage ever again? Is it going to be too hard to reshoot? And if not, then you could always just delete the footage completely. Talking heads like the one I'm shooting now might be 25 minutes worth of footage, and I'll use about 3 to 4 minutes worth of that. So things like this, I'm never going to use again. If I ever had to, I can just reshoot. I wouldn't recommend this if you've gone on the holiday of a lifetime, because that's a different story. You're not going to be able to get that footage back. You might want to revisit that footage to make a different edit down the line. But using these videos as an example, timing belt and water pump, you've got 114 gigabytes worth of footage you are never going to have to go back and look at or edit again. You could very easily just delete that, save the finished project. So timing belt and water pump, 10 gig. So we can get 114 gig down to 10 gig, just in case something went wrong with YouTube and you lost your video, you still have that to upload to another platform. Letting go of the footage and admitting how unimportant it really is after the project's been completed and exported is another great way to save storage, which a lot of people don't like to do, but it is the most effective way of saving storage. You will know if you can't delete your footage. If you're working for clients, if you're shooting weddings, if you're working as part of a team on a larger production, it's a different story. But for the average person on YouTube, once a project is uploaded, that footage is essentially useless. Are you going to pay hundreds of dollars for new SSDs and new hard drives continuously? I'll save the hard drive space for higher quality filming that would be hard to replicate again in the future, things that you're more proud of, and all your general day-to-day video uploads. I would strongly recommend that most people just delete them. Another way to save space is by choosing a lower bitrate or a lower resolution for shots in controlled environments. This shot here, for example, I shoot in 4K. I do not shoot 422 10-bit. I shoot 420 10-bit. I shoot HEVC or H.265, which is compressed, and I shoot at 50 megabits per second, even though I could be shooting 400 megabits per second. I could even shoot at 1080p and go a lower bitrate again. And the reason I say for controlled environments is because you can get away with this. The background is static. There's not a lot of data needed to replicate that. You can get away with a lower bitrate in a controlled environment where the camera's locked off. You don't need to shoot all intra, for example, unless your computer can't handle the compressed files. So lower resolutions on locked off shots, lower bit rates on locked off shots. Moving forward for myself, because I've sort of been hedging my bets so far with a couple SSDs saving consolidated libraries, a couple SSDs saving my original folder naming schemes. I honestly think for myself, it's better just to copy the consolidated libraries. The reason I think this is better is because the library and the original media get transported around hard drives together. There's no relinking required. Nothing ever gets unlinked. If you ever needed to work on something again, they travel around together. Now you might think you have less control in the naming scheme, but you can store a library within your own naming scheme. All you have to do is decide how you want to organize your library and event names, because if you consider them as parts of the folder hierarchy, then everything on top of that in the folder hierarchy can be your own custom creation anyway. G'day guys, today I'm just gonna words. You know, it's just about files. I don't even know where to start. Just in MP4.